Donald Trump is unraveling in real time, and the world can see it. Not in the performative cable news sense where every eyebrow twitch becomes breaking. I mean unraveling in the consequential, measurable sense. Allies are warning about cascading economic shock. Adversaries are publicly calling him a liar, and his own messaging is so incoherent that it's starting to look less like strategy and more like impulse control failure with nuclear-adjacent stake. When a leader's decision-making turns into a feedback loop of ego, grievance, and market manipulation vibes, the rest of us don't get the luxury of treating it like entertainment. Here's the basic picture Trump and the MAGA ecosystem keep trying to sell. The United States is executing a bold plan, negotiations are underway, the other side is bending, and any chaos is the necessary turbulence of strength. But the details coming from outside the Trump bubble tell a very different story. World leaders aren't speaking like people watching a disciplined operation. They're speaking like people bracing for a long, ugly aftershock. Italy's defense minister essentially described the kind of dread that doesn't come from partisan sniping, but from briefings that keep you awake at night, warning about looming effects on economies and daily life. South Korea's president echoed the same anxious register, talking about turmoil, energy shock, and the sense that the outlook is worse than expected. That's not the language of confidence in American leadership. That's the language of people preparing for an avoidable crisis, driven by a reckless actor who doesn't pay the costs of his own decisions. And then there's Iran's response, which is where Trump's narrative really starts to disintegrate. Trump's people insist negotiations are happening. Iranian officials keep saying, flatly, they are not negotiating with Trump's regime and that what's been conveyed amounts to excessive, unrealistic demands. You don't have to, like Iran's government, no serious observer does, to recognize the strategic significance of this. If Trump is telling Americans we're negotiating while the other side is publicly saying we're not, you don't get to hand-wave that away as propaganda and expect the rest of the world to play along. Diplomatic credibility is a currency. Trump spends it like it's monopoly money. The White House's public posture, as presented here, tries to solve this contradiction with pure attitude. Don't believe the other side because they're bad. But that's not a substitute for coherence. It's a substitute for accountability. When reporters ask why U.S. claims don't match Iran's, the response is essentially, trust us, not them, without providing verifiable structure, who is negotiating, through what channel, with what framework, and why any of it should be believed, given the administration's own track record of improvisation. It's not just that Iran denies it, it's that Trump's camp keeps demanding the public accept simultaneously that negotiations are real and also too secret to explain, which is convenient in the way that my girlfriend goes to another school is convenient. The more this story unfolds, the more it resembles Trump's old habit of treating markets like a mood ring for his personal brand. The transcript describes Trump trying to pump the markets with messaging, briefly nudging sentiment only for reality to reassert itself. That dynamic matters because it turns national security into a tool for short-term perception management. When a president behaves as if global conflict is another lever to yank for a headline pop, everyone else, drivers, truckers, small businesses, families paying heating bills, becomes collateral in a performance designed to keep one man's narrative afloat. Energy is the pressure point, and everyone knows it. That's why international leaders are losing sleep. That's why oil prices and shipping routes come up again and again. It's also why Trump's rhetoric gets especially dangerous when he starts talking about taking or seizing oil or obliterating infrastructure. This isn't just crude language. It's the kind of rhetoric that can harden opposition, inflame regional escalation, and give adversarial propagandists a gift-wrapped clip to play on loop. The American president saying the quiet part out loud, making it sound like war is about plunder. Even if you set aside the legal and moral implications for a moment, it's strategically idiotic. It tells the world that America's intentions are predatory, and it invites retaliation not only from the targeted state, but from publics and governments across the region who may not love Iran, but also don't want to be the next domino in Trump's ego-driven spectacle. Then you hit the most alarming part. Talk of striking civilian infrastructure, including desalination plants. If you want a litmus test for whether this administration is thinking like a responsible actor or like a reality show, that's it. Desalination is water. Water is life. Threatening water infrastructure is the kind of thing that doesn't just deepen conflict, it stains a country's reputation for a generation. And when asked directly about the legality and civilian impact, the answer offered is not a careful articulation of lawful military objectives and proportionality standards. It's swagger, capabilities beyond your wildest imagination. That isn't reassurance. It's an admission that intimidation has replaced discipline. Watch the pattern. Trump escalates rhetorically, the press asks about consequences, and the administration responds with bluster while insisting everything is lawful. That's not how credibility is built. Credibility comes from specificity, from constraints, from checks, from adherence to transparent standards. What we're seeing instead is the classic MAGA governing style. Demand trust, reject oversight, smear questioners, and treat skepticism as disloyalty. It's the same authoritarian-flavored playbook Trump used at home, only now it's being applied to war. And the hypocrisy is right there in the open. On sanctions, enforcement, and case-by-case exceptions, the messaging becomes mushy in a way that reveals priorities. If the administration threatens smaller countries with tariffs and seizures, but suddenly becomes flexible when Russia is involved, people draw conclusions. They're not complicated conclusions. Trump's softness toward Putin has never been subtle. It's been a defining feature of his political identity. When your enforcement is selective and your explanations are incoherent, you don't look strong. You look compromised. The transcript also raises the prospect of Trump floating the idea that allied Arab nations should pay for the vast majority of the cost of the war. That's vintage Trump. Start something enormous, then pass the bill around like it's a casino tab. It's also diplomatically corrosive. Allies are not ATMs. You can negotiate burden sharing in good faith. You can't treat partners like marks in a deal where America creates the risk and someone else writes the check. This isn't leadership. It's shakedown politics with a flag pin. Meanwhile, the domestic impact is immediate and brutal. When diesel prices spike, it hits the backbone of the economy. Truckers aren't a talking point, they're the supply chain. The administration's response, as quoted, tries to soothe with a list of emergency measures and the promise of long-term benefit. But the credibility gap remains. The public is being asked to endure short-term fluctuations for a long-term benefit, defined by an operation whose objectives are vague, whose timeline is shaky, and whose core claims about negotiations are disputed by the very counterpart supposedly at the table. That's not a plan. That's a sales pitch. And here's the bigger Democratic critique that matters, because it's not just about one crisis or one set of quotes. Trumpism, as a political project, has always treated institutions as props. The military as a backdrop for swagger, diplomacy as a stage for dominance theater, markets as a scoreboard for personal validation, and truth as something you bend until it snaps. The danger isn't only that Trump lies, it's that he governs as if lying is a governing philosophy. In that framework, reality becomes negotiable until it isn't. Oil prices don't negotiate. Allied confidence doesn't negotiate. Escalation dynamics don't negotiate. International law doesn't negotiate. You can bully a press secretary into repeating lines. You cannot bully physics, economics, or human retaliation. If you want to understand why leaders abroad sound terrified, it's because they've seen this movie before. In the early days of COVID, Trump tried to will a virus away with positive thinking and denial, turning public health into a branding exercise. The comparison is chilling because the mechanism is the same. Deny the trajectory. Insist everything is under control. Attack anyone who contradicts you. Then pretend the consequences are someone else's fault. The difference is that a war spiral has its own momentum. And the price isn't only measured in charts. It's measured in lives, regional stability, and a global order that becomes more fragile every time American leadership is reduced to Trump's personal mood swings. So when the administration says, don't trust what Iran says, fine, don't trust Iran. But also don't trust a president who has a documented history of using crises to serve himself, who treats accountability like an insult, and who has repeatedly shown that he confuses dominance with competence. The question isn't whether Iran is honest. The question is whether the United States is being led responsibly. Right now, the evidence points the other way. Allies panicking, adversaries mocking, markets wobbling, energy surging, and a White House trying to muscle its way through contradictions instead of resolving them. This is what it looks like when a movement built on grievance collides with the hard limits of reality. MAGA can chant, MAGA can spin. MAGA can bully reporters and sneer at experts, but it cannot rewrite cause and effect. And when the rest of the world is telling you they can't sleep because they're watching the United States stumble through a conflict with a leader who won't tell the truth, even when the truth is the only thing that can stabilize the moment, that's not partisan drama. That's a warning flare.